here in Bedford. Our goal, not just the teacher's goal, not just the school board's goal, not just the administration's goal, is all the same. We're trying to align it so that we're figuring out the best way to improve quality education here. That doesn't mean we agree. As I talked about before, we've also hit impasse as we did that 2 years ago, and we, as you pointed out, we're not doing any Cadillacs here. In fact, if you look at the statistics in New Hampshire, we are well below the state average. Mm-hmm. Our teaching salaries may be somewhat higher than the average. As you point out, we're 76 out of 161, so that suggests we're going to be higher than the average, but not in our peer districts. And anyway, so that's I've run out of time, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Scott.
Can we hide the man behind the curtain there?
He's
Well,
good.
If you go too far, we'll stop you, but you can,
That's all
don't
right.
feel free to finish your thought. Now, the fourth question is back to you, Scott.
Thank
How can we teach our children to think critically and allow exposure to a variety of viewpoints in our curriculum?
That's a good question, Jeff, and I think it goes back actually to the IB program. The approach goes back to that. AP has taken, AP tries to be, the advanced placement program tries to be a survey course, the kind of survey course you'll take at an introductory college level, and tries to cover everything. IB does not try to cover the entire spectrum. Instead, it tries to teach those critical thinking skills. And we don't do that. And so it's a whole different, it's a style of teaching. So we're required as an IB school to have our teachers trained in that pedagogy. And then they don't just use it in the class, in the IB classes, nor are they only using it for IB diploma students. But any of those teachers would use the same kinds of approaches to critical thinking that they would in the IB program. They'll use it in all their classes. And so I think that the key there is to not trying to just looking for memorization of facts, but looking for analysis and depth and in-depth discussion of something where you're looking at different points of view and you're looking at an ability to discuss it and give some back and forth, and that's what those classes are trying to model.
Thank you. Mike?
I teach critical thinking workshops, one of my favorite classes. But there's a distinction here. If you're teaching adults or 18 plus, you can really look at the core of critical thinking, and that is to challenge assumptions, never take anything at face value. A little bit more dicey when you start talking K to 12 or elementary to the middle schools to 9 to 12. You can't tell a sixth grader to challenge authority. It's not going to work too well in the classroom. So you have to modify it. I've checked out the IB program, and I agree with the core principle of their expository research and critical thinking. We all need to be critical thinkers. I like to see it, especially at the junior and senior level in high school, because by the time I get them at the undergraduate level, and I'll be very honest, my A students are homeschoolers or private schoolers, and some public schoolers. The 25 to 30% of students I feel fall in two categories: public high school graduates and GED programs. And that really, really bothers me. My goal is 0% failure, and it breaks my heart when I have to fail a quarter or more of my class because they don't have the critical thinking skills that they should have developed back in high school.
Okay. Scott, would you like another minute?
Sure, Jeff. We can always do better. One of the goals of the school district is to figure out ways that we can get continuous feedback on our performance so we can measure how well we're doing and try to do better at it. In order to do that, we try to follow our students, our graduates, and see how well they do in school. And particularly our best students in the IB programs, it's easy and fun to follow them because they do so well, and not surprisingly. And I'm not sure I'm going to say that we can take credit for all of that, because they're outstanding students by the time before we get them. I mean, they're as one of our teachers has said, you know, teaching in Bedford is fun because when we get here in the morning, the kids come with a full stomach and ready to learn, and that's not always the case elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that we the school district are not going to take credit for all that success, but it is clear that our best IB students are coming back from very challenging college programs and saying that they're not only well prepared, but they're competing effectively there. I think that's a great story.
Thank you. Would you like to add any more?
No, I'm very impressed. Part of my doctoral research, and in fact I'll announce it on live TV today, is I've chosen Bedford High School as the source of my research site starting in the fall for my doctoral dissertation. I think I better follow up with a letter to the principal and the superintendent in that regard when you actually see this taping. And part of that doctoral research would be looking at testimonials and feedback coming back to the school district, which, to be frank, we don't really have that at the community college level. We have a lot of federal laws that interfere in that type of nonsense,
Uh-huh.
to be honest.
Okay.
By the way, I am CITI certified for human research.
Thank you, Mike. And Mike, we'll come back to you. What do you think about New Hampshire adopting the Common Core standards?
Again, I'm still doing research on this. What I really want to see is, does the region, all of New England, are they trending towards the Common Core standard or not? Are we going to be alienated if we don't? I think there's some political elements here that I really want to take a look at, to be honest. I do believe in standardization, but not at the expense, of quality. And that's my real concern. Will the Common Core standard actually decrease quality of education? If it does, I'm totally against it. So I need to research a little bit more.
Okay. Scott?
Yeah, I don't want to give a non-answer to that as well. It's obviously the Common Core adoption or not, as you point out, is a state level issue. It's not a school board issue.
Yep.
We have opinions on it, and we've debated those opinions both privately and in public at the school district level. Obviously, we're going to do our best at the school district to implement the Common Core program because that's what's there right now. To the extent that we get something else, if we have input on it, I'm with Mike on the fact that we got to make sure that there's a meaningful core and that it sets a high enough standard to be effective for our kids. It's got to be a challenge to them, and it can't be it can't be just rote memorization type test, teaching to the test. There's got to be something more going on than that, and that's the concern about Common Core. One of the benefits of Common Core is that as we share that with so many other districts across the country, it becomes easier and easier to develop online programs or supplements to what we're doing in a blended classroom or a regular classroom. And that's as we get more effective at creating teaching modules, whether we're doing it at the high school or someone else produces them nationally, it'll be important to be a part of the Common Core or whatever the universal standards are, because it's easier to sort of create modules and adopt them.
Mike, would you like more time?
No, again, my emphasis is upon quality. I like to see a perpetual feedback loop for the states that implement Common Core, an accelerating feedback loop that we can grow and learn from each other and increase the quality and the standards. I'm leery about when the Department of Education comes down with carte blanche over-the-counter standards and they throw it down the throat of the school district and say, this is it. Well, time out. I'm a firm believer in locus of control. The school district knows what's best for their students, not DOE.
And Scott, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I just a thought about local control, because I'm sure Mike and I are very much in the same boat there. Sometimes we receive criticism on the IB side that we've given up local control, and actually when we had this fight in Concord earlier this year or last year, it was precisely over local control issue, because we in Bedford had adopted the IB program, and it was the school board that made that decision. and the school board that reinforces that decision each time it comes up. And it's, in my mind, not appropriate for Concord to step in and tell us to do it another way. And if IB ever ceases to meet our needs, we're out of there, because the school board makes that decision. The school board can unmake that decision and can shift us out someplace else. So I'm fully with you on local control issues.
May I?
You can use some of your time for your next question if you want. But the next question goes to Scott. And Mike, you touched on this in your opening remarks along these lines about the makeup of the school board itself. As far as the curriculum committees, what people should make up those committees?
On the curriculum committee itself, I have not been on the curriculum committee. Let's see if this is one of the times I usually turn to somebody else and say, now, who's on the committee? I know Cindy's on there. I know we've got a number of our educators on there. I'm sure I know Chip McGee's on there. I believe Tim is on there as well. There's a couple of a couple of teachers, and we also have some community members. Every one of our standing committees, as well as our ad hoc committees, are usually composed of around 15 to 20 people. Usually a selection from both the school board, the school administration, the professional staff, and then members of the community who either have special interest or special background that gives them some ability to provide input into that. We have followed that consistently with curriculum as well.
Okay. Mike, same question.
There's a little bit of a dichotomy here between local school districts and community colleges. Community colleges, we have the wonderful thing called the Board of Trustees, and they have a lot of political influence over curriculum, unfortunately. I agree with what Scott said as far as the stakeholders are concerned within curriculum development committees and course developers. Especially course developers have to work hand in hand with the curriculum. For example, if I were going to have a curriculum in adult learning, okay? Well, I would map out the curriculum, but it's the course developers that are on the front lines actually developing the courseware, to be honest. I'd like to see the online course developers, the hybrid course developers, the core course developers sit down with the curriculum development committees and all the stakeholders involved and mapping out a framework for it. I don't always see that in some school districts, to be honest. Okay, the course developers are sort of like the last cog in the wheel. We will boilerplate everything, and oh, by the way, this is what they have, this is what we have, go to it. Well, they should be on the front end of the process, not the back end.
Okay. Scott, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think that's a really important insight, Mike, that the course development needs to be a part of the overall curriculum decision-making, and it's not a separate item. And that's exactly the way Bedford High School is run. The Bedford, overall school district is run. So that, our course development people, and of course we don't have very much in terms of online or hybrid courses, so I'm not suggesting that. We do have a couple of hybrid courses. Those are all developed the same way all of our courses are developed at the high school or in our school district, and that is by the professional learning communities themselves. So they get together, they decide what the curriculum objectives are. That's worked out with the curriculum development committee. But once those have been developed, then the PLCs get together and they map out what needs to be done, and they divide that up. Sometimes there's time set aside during the summer months to focus on it. There may be people given specific responsibilities for it, but it's done as a community effort so that those very people are also involved in evaluating the effectiveness of it after it's been implemented.
Okay. And Mike, would you like to?
I appreciate what you're saying, that you're more transparent because sometimes it's done in the shadows,
Right.
especially at the college level.
Okay. And back to you, Mike. What ideas, or do you have any ideas, to help reduce the school budget and thus the taxes?
Other than putting everybody on a furlough, probably not. If you're talking about cutting, are you talking about cutting goods and services for the school district? I don't recommend cutting any goods. I don't recommend cutting any services. I would like to see more volunteer work, if possible. If we can identify issues within a school district that we can farm out to volunteers. But for example, the most recent debate about Sandy Hook and the Second Amendment gun control. I'm a concealed weapons permit holder. I've had it for 41 years. Sheriff Jim Hardy and I had this discussion. Maybe we can get volunteers as bus monitors, okay? Volunteers that are firearms trained. Just one idea. The point is, if we can involve the local community and we can identify what talent and resources that they have that we can bring into the school district at a freebie basis, let's do it.
Okay. Scott?
Yeah, I think that, that's the right answer. In terms of, that's one of the components we ought to always look at as a way of keeping our budget low, is what can we ask the community to do without having to pay for it? I ask that question frequently at school board meetings about a variety of issues. Sometimes the response I get is, it's not always free because we have to manage the process. We have to manage the volunteers when they come in. And so sometimes the billing doesn't live, the reality doesn't live up to the billing. But we consistently ask for that. And from the board side, we ask that. And our school district has a strong record in that regard. The excellent program outside the green development gardens and stuff, the playground behind Peter Woodbury School, much of that has been developed with volunteer contributions or grant monies, and that's something that we will continue to look at. Other ways to reduce the budget, this may not sound revolutionary, but obviously we have to be very thoughtful and careful in our negotiations with a professional association. We can't afford to consistently have raises that are outside of what's happening in the rest of New Hampshire. We have to be cautious with that. We also have to be we have to look at opportunities to reduce the budget through things like online or blended learning. Those will not immediately provide opportunities for cuts. They're not going to. Our first emphasis has to be, in any use of technology, is how does it improve the education of our kids? But I believe that once we get better at that, and I don't know how many years that's going to be, but as we get better at it, I believe that technology will give us an opportunity to reduce some of the costs. And that's one of the reasons why I think we're trying to be a leader, although not a heavy investor yet in that field.
Thank you. Mike, would you like more time?
I would just interject one little caution. Technology is not the panacea for all educational ills. And it can be very expensive when you reach a point of diminishing returns, about the 95th percentile,
Yeah.
where it makes it virtually impossible to continue because of the cost is prohibitive.
Scott?
No, I'm good.
You're good. Mike, I'd like to ask a follow-up question. I'll start with you for something you just mentioned. So would you mentioned Sandy Hook, would you endorse civilian individuals carrying firearms on a school bus?
If they were properly trained, if they were endorsed by the school district, if they had the wherewithal to do it. I'm not talking about a senior citizen performing this function. After 9/11, there was a big to-do with the airline pilots, and a lot of them refused at first to carry firearms to get the training. Well, eventually they did. We have sky marshals because of 9/11. It's pretty insidious and really sad fact of life that we may need some type of function like that on school buses. Now, when I drove a school bus, I had a monitor, for the most part, at least for the special ed children. We may have to go down that route. I don't think we can pay the local police department. That's probably an overtime status. The budget's going to balloon out the yin-yang. But if we can get some volunteers, maybe returning veterans, retired police officers, they want to volunteer their time, and they had the requisite safety training, been certified by the police departments and the sheriff's department, whatever. I think we ought to consider it as an option, to be honest. I mean, to me, the safety of the children is paramount. And one of the things that really irritates me, Jeff, is the idea of the sign saying this is a gun-free zone. That's nothing more than a magnet for nutsos. It really is.
Thanks, Mike. And Scott, I'll offer you the same question.
Which is, should we have guns on the buses, guns in school?
On the buses, I think was what Mike originally said, and that's what I asked.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm not ready for guns on the buses. I agree with Mike that this is a serious issue, and we ought to be we ought to make sure that whatever remedy we have contributes to safety and doesn't detract from it. I think that's why Mike was so careful, and I think it's appropriately so, to condition having a gun on a bus to somebody who's trained, somebody who's certified, somebody, so that we're not getting the wrong person with guns on there. And so I'm not there yet. Maybe there's a system where I could get comfortable with that. Let's talk about what we can do short of having guns on the school buses. One of those has been mentioned. Surveillance cameras is something that we have a safety group that meets regularly at the school, in the school district, that reviews our safety protocols. It meets with the town and state officials as well, so that we have feedback and give and take from them. After Sandy Hook, some of those conversations took on some pretty, as you can imagine, some pretty serious tenor to them. Yet we are continuing to follow through with the basic approach that we've had all along, and that is to have a well mapped out safety protocol, and to look at what technology becomes available and try to integrate that as it becomes an option. And right now, I think the easiest one, the most recent one that we've approved from the budget perspective, is increased use of surveillance cameras outside of the schools so we can see what's coming in.
Thanks, Scott. Mike, I'll give you more time.
I know the bus driver that is dead in Alabama wish he had a gun when that guy jumped the bus. But we do have an option. There is a thing called less lethal. They call it non-lethal ammunition. That's a lie. It's less lethal. It's rubber bullets, and you have the type of bullets to have a pepper charge within it. Now you can hit an assailant, which will basically blind them until you can take them over. You can still inject serious bodily injury, even death, if you hit them in the head. But if you hit them in the shoulder, you're going to disable them for a couple minutes, I guarantee it. I don't see why we can't have less lethal ammunition on board a bus.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. And Scott?
I think that's a recommendation we've certainly taken into consideration.
Okay. All right, and our last question, I'll come back to you, Scott, on an issue that that took up some time at the deliberative session.
Sure.
Do you support or oppose the petition warrant article, Article 10, that the school board develop clear numeric targets for students passing AP and IB programs?
Jeff, I appreciate the question. I actually am in support of it. We decided as a board not to take a position on it. There are, for a variety of reasons, mostly just because we don't want to dilute the impact of our recommendation on the other warrant articles, which are ones that we've proposed. And I think that some of my friends on the school board, the reason they haven't been allowed to support this particular formulation is because they think we're already focused on this issue, that we're already doing it. We have 321 passes today in AP and IB.